Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Friday everybody. Just a piece of housekeeping first up. Unless there is a huge development in the next day or so, there likely will not be an episode of China Update tomorrow, Saturday, or on Sunday, but we'll be back with regular episodes on Monday. Okay, let's start today's episode with housing, China's slow-moving crisis, which is almost 12 months old now. Once again, despite now fairly robust efforts at the local and national level to prop up a collapsing real estate market, the average price of pre-owned housing units across 100 Chinese cities slid again in July, with smaller cities seeing the biggest price falls. By the way, collapsing real estate market is how China's own two largest financial media outlets, Yicai and Caixin, describe the current state of the market. They also both continue to use the term housing crisis, so these are not just projections from overseas analysts. According to the China Index Academy, in the 100 cities surveyed, average housing prices fell 0.09% month-on-month in July, 0.07 of a percentage point sharper than the drop that we saw back in June. 69 of the cities reported price declines in July, 11 more than in June. Now, some viewers may hear these numbers and think, well, these are tiny price reductions. How can it be representative of anything of significance? Well, we remember that the market is operating in the face of a de facto price floor environment imposed by government fiat. Local governments have been directed to not let prices fall, and as such it is very difficult for desperate developers and those who are trying to sell homes second-hand to sell units below certain price thresholds. Now, we know from Economics 101 that when governments block price signals from operating correctly, the underlying economic reality will simply manifest itself in a different way. And we have seen this in the collapse in home sales month after month, as households are unwilling or unable to purchase homes at the current price point levels. According to data released by China Real Estate Information Corp this week, for example, total sales by 100 of the country's top property developers fell 28.6% month-on-month. We're also seeing a continued divergence of housing price resilience between first and second tier cities versus smaller cities. In July, the average price of pre-owned housing in first-tier cities was up 0.69% month-on-month, while third and fourth-tier cities saw prices drop 0.59%. Meanwhile, a trend that we have been following for well over a month now is the slow bleeding of the housing crisis into the wider economy. The big fear for policymakers is a systemic crisis spreading through the banking system. As we have been following, stalled projects have smashed the confidence of hundreds of thousands of homebuyers, triggering a mortgage boycott across more than 90 cities. Analysts are currently debating what the damage could be to China's financial system. One scenario has banks facing mortgage losses of $350 billion. This week, S&P Global Ratings estimated that 2.4 trillion RMB, approximately $356 billion, or 6.4% of mortgages are at risk. Deutsche Bank puts it higher at 7%. Quote, "Banks are caught in the middle. If they don't help the developers finish the projects, they will end up losing much more. If they do, that of course would make the government happy, but they add more to their exposure to delayed real estate projects." End quote. Bloomberg's Hong Kong team, in a special report published this week, provides several charts which they argue, quote, "show why the crisis could escalate and undermine financial stability." End quote. As we move through these charts, I'm going to quote the observations of their analysts. So this is the first chart here, and the analysts observed that the exposure of Chinese banks to the property sector tops that of any other industry. There were 39 trillion RMB of outstanding mortgages and another 13 trillion RMB of loans to developers at the end of March. As authorities move to keep risks in check, lenders with high exposure could come under greater scrutiny. Mortgages accounted for more than 34% of total loans at Postal Savings Bank of China Co. and China Construction Bank Corp. At the end of 2021, above a regulatory cap of 32.5% for the biggest banks. Bad loans at lenders, which amounted to 2.9 trillion RMB at the end of March, are poised to reach new records and further strain the economy. While China's total debt to GDP is forecast to climb to a fresh record this year, consumers have been reluctant to take on more leverage. That has ignited a debate over the risk of China falling into a so-called balance sheet recession, with households and companies cutting back on spending and investing. Disposable income growth is slowing, further hurting the ability of households to service their debts. And now for the next graph, and we are still quoting the Bloomberg analysts, home sales could drop as much as 33% this year amid the mortgage boycott, further squeezing the liquidity of distressed developers and leading to more defaults. Some 28 of the top 100 developers by sales have either defaulted on bonds or negotiated debt extensions with creditors over the past year. Property investments, which drive demand for goods and services that account for about 20% of the nation's gross domestic product, or potentially as high as 30%, plunged 9.4% in June. And finally, after recording the fastest profit expansion in nearly a decade last year, the nation's lenders face a challenging 2022 as the government pressures them to support the economy at the cost of earnings. A 10% slowdown in real estate investment growth translates into a 28 basis point increase in overall bad loans, meaning a 17% decline in their 2022 earnings. The Bloomberg analysts conclude by observing, quote, the Hang Seng Index of mainland banks has plunged 12% this month, end quote. Okay, next up, let's have a quick update for the Taiwan situation. We unpacked the unfolding Taiwan crisis in the previous 3 videos, so anyone who is interested in this and who has not seen these videos provide more context. On Thursday, yesterday, the People's Liberation Army fired 11 ballistic missiles into waters close to critical ports in Taiwan after beginning their first day of formal military drills, which are expected to continue until Sunday. We remember that the live fire military drills were initially announced to be located in 6 areas off Taiwan's coast. According to the Japanese, 1 missile flew over Taipei itself. If so, analysts agree that this represents a serious escalation. In a statement late Thursday, Taiwan's defense ministry said that the missiles had traveled above the atmosphere and therefore posed no risk to the island. Tokyo is not happy either, as several of the ballistic missiles landed in Japan's exclusive economic zone. The Dongfeng ballistic missiles include so-called carrier killers, anti-ship intermediate-range DF-21s intended to deter U.S. Navy carrier strike groups from moving into the so-called First Island chain in the event of a kinetic conflict. Taipei, Tokyo, and Washington quickly condemned the missile launches. A Pentagon spokesperson confirmed that the USS Ronald Reagan Aircraft Strike Group has been ordered to, quote, remain on station in the general area to monitor the situation, end quote. U.S. media outlets report today that sources say that U.S. and Japanese F-15 fighter jets are conducting joint exercises from bases on the Japanese island of Okinawa, not far from Taiwan. Taiwan's defense ministry also announced that the People's Liberation Army also sent 22 fighter jets towards Taiwan on Thursday, and an additional 4 PLA drones had flown over small Taiwan-controlled islands just off the mainland coast near the Fujianese city of Xiamen. On Friday, today, Taiwan's Premier, Mr. Su Jin-chang, expressed in a speech that Taiwan represents, quote, freedom and democracy, end quote, and that, quote, the evil neighbor next door flexes its muscles on our doorstep and arbitrarily sabotages the busiest waterways in the world with military exercises, end quote. Shipping lanes and flight paths have indeed been severely affected, with several airlines cancelling all flights to Taiwan until after the PRC military actions conclude. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button, and for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help me continue making these episodes every day, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is a tremendous help. That is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching and for the continued support. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.